This is problem number 3 on the practice problems for test number 1. Sliding down my son's luge run, I realize I'm going too fast and will crash into a tree that is 200 feet in front of me if I don't put my foot down to brake. I'm going 50 feet per second. If I decelerate at a constant rate of 7 feet per second, will I hit the tree? Show all equations. So that show all equations phrase was Peter's way of saying derive everything. So don't start with some physics equation that you just got memorized. Let's go from basics. So the basics here starts with the acceleration is 7 feet per second, although we're decelerating. So how about we call that a negative 7 feet per second squared. And then we're going to work our way. This problem has to do with distance because the tree is 200 feet away. So we're trying to work our way from the acceleration formula to the distance or the position formula. So how do we go from acceleration to distance? Well, in between, we're going to meet another friend of ours, velocity. And do we get there from acceleration to velocity by taking a derivative or an antiderivative? And hopefully we understand it's an antiderivative. So antiderivative of acceleration is v. Antiderivative of negative 7 is negative 7x, but let's use t as our variable here for time. But really important here is that we put plus c. There's some unknown constant sitting there at the end. So how are we going to find that constant? Well, right here it says I am going 50 feet per second. That's at this moment, at the start of this experiment. So what does that mean? It means that if you plug 0 in for time, the velocity is 50, positive 50. So let's plug those numbers in to this equation. We're plugging 0 for time, so that's negative 7 times nothing plus c, to be determined, and the velocity at that moment is 50. So that means that c is 50. So this equation right here becomes the velocity is negative 7t plus 50. Okay, we're at velocity. The goal was position. How do we get from velocity to position? We take another antiderivative. Antiderivative of velocity is position. We'll use the letter s. Antiderivative of negative 7t. Add 1 to the power, divide by the new power. Antiderivative of 50 is 50t. Don't forget over here, some constant. How are we going to find the constant? Well, let me make sure this really looks like an s, not a 5. So how do we find the constant? Well, all we know here is that the tree is 200 feet in front of the luger. So we're kind of free to decide what we want to call s of 0. You can call it 0, you can call it 200, you can do whatever you want. I'll just call it 0. Say wherever Peter is at the start of this luge ride, or at least when he realizes he's in trouble, we'll just call that the 0 feet mark. So that means at t equals 0, s is also 0. So 0 for both variables will allow us to find c. And it turns out with this choice that c is 0. So that means that our formula for s is now negative 7/2 t squared plus 50t. And then finally, we are told that the tree is 200 feet away, so we got to figure out how long it's going to take us to stop because we want to make sure we have enough time to stop. So how do we figure out when we've stopped? Well, what's special about the moment in time when we've stopped? Is it something special about the acceleration, the velocity, or the position? What's special is that the velocity is something. At the moment you stop, you know what the velocity is. We know the velocity is 0. So how about we take our velocity equation, it was right up at the top of this page, negative 7t plus 50, and we set it equal to 0. Solve this equation for t. T is 57th seconds, so a little over 7 seconds for us to stop. And then finally, what we were interested in was the position. The position when? The position when we stop after 57th seconds. So when you plug 57ths in, I'll write it in function notation, 57ths, s of that number, is equal to negative 7/2 times 57ths squared plus 50 times 57ths. So type that into your calculator and crunch the numbers. You'll find out this is about 179 feet. What does that mean? It means that from the time we start decelerating until we stop moving, we have traveled 179 feet. Well, that's good news for us because the tree was 200 feet away. The tree is 200 feet away, so we are safe. Of course, this assumes it didn't take us any time to do the calculations to decide whether or not we were safe. So assuming we did all the calculus stuff right there real quick, then I think we would stop in time before we hit the tree.